Action Comics number 18, written by Grant Morrison, art by Brad Walker and Rags Morales. This is the finale of Grant Morrison's whole run, and I'm only going to try to explain it as best I can. So last issue, Superman was going up against Super Doom, and Lex Luthor showed up. And this issue picks up immediately in that place where Lex is just trying to fight back against Super Doom in one of his mech suits, saying, "No one kills Superman but me." And all the narration is saying, like, this is it. This is where the new American mythology comes from. These super gods. Because that's what Grant Morrison's whole deal is. And so it gives Superman enough time. He gets over to Krypto and sees that Krypto is currently all chained up in the kryptonite chains. And then Super Doom tears open Lex's suit, sees that Lex isn't actually in there, it's a hologram, and Lex is actually back in his cell. And he's like, "Well, Superman, I hope that gave you enough time." So Superman lands one solid punch on Super Doom's face, knocks him down. But then Super Doom just responds by batting him out of the air and throwing him over to the anti-Superman club team, whatever you want to call it. And the woman who has red kryptonite as her power starts causing Superman to hallucinate. And he's basically hallucinating Vinny, just being like, "You can't possibly beat me. I'm so much smarter than Mxyzptlk. Like, I'm incredibly intelligent." And he's basically just trying to override his will. Then we cut over to the hospital where Lois and Jimmy are with Mixie, who just woke up, along with the Legion of Superheroes in there. One of the nurses is like, "You can't be in here." And Saturn Girl just says, "Piss off." And so she leaves. And then they start talking to Mixie like, "Okay, how do we help Superman? What do we do?" And at that point, one of Mixie's sons comes into the room and says, "Hey, you've been a bad dad to me all this time. My mom's bloodstains are on this Superman shirt because of you." And Mixie's like, "You idiot. I taught your mom how to use her blood to hide in the second dimension." And then Saturn Girl realizes that the sun is actually just another hand of Vinny that's been damaged over time. So at that point, Mixie starts seizing up, and they go to get a crash cart, and Lightning Lad's like, "Nah, screw it, I'm just going to do it here." So he zaps him back into good shape, and it's basically like, "All right, tell us what we need to know. How do we prevent Superman's death?" And he says that the trick is to make sure that Vinny gets the trick. And then the Legion posits like, "Okay, what if we take a time bubble through the fourth dimension and slam it into this fifth dimensional being's face? Would that work?" I don't think they ever actually do that, but they're talking about it. So anyway, Super Doom and Superman are still fighting while Superman is still hallucinating. And during the fight, Susie, Lois Lane's niece, I think, shows up along with the dude who, like, kidnapped her because she's one of the Neo-Sapiens. And apparently he's got his own team called the Cometeers. And they show up and basically just, over the course of 2 pages, take care of the entire anti-Superman team and get the kryptonite chains off of Krypto. So at that point, they're like, "All right, we did what we could do. It's up to Superman now. He has to be the one that deals with it, with Super Doom specifically." So then we see that everyone is, all the pieces are coming into place here. And they are arresting Mixie's son, despite the fact that he's not consciously aware of anything. So Super Doom picks up Superman and he's like, "You don't get it. In your perspective, this is the only attack you've ever fired at me. But by my perspective, you've attacked me dozens of times, and I've beaten it back every single time. You've just kept on losing over and over again. And this time will be no different." And so he calls to everybody who's apparently mind-linked at this point and says, "If everyone says their names backwards, then it'll cause some sort of 5-dimensional ripple, and it will cause Super Doom and Vinny to lose." So everyone who's mind connected does it, and that ends up with Super Doom turning to stone, and then his armor, because he is in armor, starts a self-destruct sequence called Doomsday Mode. And so Clark picks up the whole thing and flies it out into deep space, and we see that As it explodes beyond the moon, we cut back to the fifth dimension, and Vinny is still, he just finished trying to kill Mixie, but accidentally killed the king of the fifth dimension. And he's like, oh, this is all a trick. Mixie's the one who caused all of this to happen. And so Vinny is locked away. Mixie becomes king, and we just get like a happily ever after page where Mixie says like, oh, he found the love of his life. However, his wife died in labor, giving birth to, I believe it's 3 children. 2 of them were sons that he can't bother to look at, but he does keep his daughter by his side and names her after her mother. And that's that. And it turns out that all of that story of the fifth dimension was actually a bedtime story being told by Kal-El's mom back on Krypton as Jor-El comes into the room and basically is about to say like, hey, Krypton's not doing so hot. So then we cut back to Madam Nixley, the landlord of Superman, who says, hey, you saved the fifth dimension, and technically like we're at a different point in time. I still have my one wish, but it has to be used on something red. We can try to phrase that in a way that's going to give you back your life. What do you want, Superman? And he's like, look, I made a promise to a little kid on Mars that I'd save them. So that's my wish. So we see that the Mars colony actually didn't end up dying. They were saved by Superman, but then he just disappeared for 24 hours and no one was sure where he is. We see Lois and Jimmy still in the rubble trying to take pictures and get a story on that. And then they realize, wait a minute, during that part where everyone was saying their names backwards, I swear I heard Clark Kent backwards, but he wasn't around, so where was he? And so she calls up Clark, thinking, well, maybe he's Superman. And then we see Clark answer the phone saying like, oh yeah, no, I'm fine. I just got into a little bit of a brawl, as we see Superman like come down out of the sky in the background. So it's a lot. It's a whole lot. What do I think of it? I think it is a massive story that is peak Grant Morrison. I think that this is so goddamn confusing to read month to month. I think reading it week to week would be confusing. But I do appreciate the scope of it. It feels like it was well thought out, but it is just, it's dense, man. You really got to know what you're getting into if you have any hope of doing this, because this is not something that's New 52. This feels like something where you need to read pretty much all of Superman comics in order to fully understand the scope of what's happening here. So I'm going to give this one, while I appreciate what it's doing, it does still dock points because it is just so confusing on a month-to-month comic basis. I'm going to give this one a 7.5. I think that it's good. And as for Grant Morrison's whole runs, it had its highs, it had its lows. I think that this is pretty much middling, where this was what he was building to the whole time, and it's confusing as hell, but at least it's a Grant Morrison story.